Peter, you done texting? No.
I can't text during the podcast. I have to stop.
I mean, you can. You can do whatever you want. I'll be texting you in the podcast.
I have to say that I just spent a week teaching students at Johns Hopkins, and all of them but one didn't actually use their mobile phones while I was teaching.
Did not?
No. One of them did, just nonstop.
Did you put a rule down about that?
No. I was like, it's an intercession course. They were meant to have a good time. I gave them like 10-minute breaks and stuff so they could go and, I don't know, whatever you do. Telegram or TikTok or something.
TikTok?
Yeah, they went and TikToked. But they were really well behaved. They were quite focused.
So what course were you teaching? Did you have a reading list for them? I mean, if they're having fun, they're not reading, or what's the concept?
No, it was basically based on my books and the work and the research that we do that we're bringing to Johns Hopkins University from September. So, it's all about that.
Is this a grad course?
No, these are undergrads. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Really, really smart, articulate, and really nice. There was like chemistry majors, computer science majors, politics majors, and it was really interesting seeing them all talk about.
So we have Peter Pomerantsev with us, Shadi. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah,
and we have him with us in more ways than one. I mean, he's moving here.
Wait, you're moving to DC?
Cheers.
Wow, this is great news.
Yeah,
wow, it'll be great
news.
to have you. And I think it's great to have you too, because you're the author of two great books, and your first book has one of the best titles I've ever heard. It's called let me make sure I get this right. Nothing is true.
Very memorable.
Nothing is true, and everything is possible.
That's it.
Which I think captures the moment that we're in.
You know what's funny? Shadi borrowed that book about 6 months ago, and he's been reading it so carefully. I think he's probably read it like 6 or 7 times in the time. He just won't give it back.
But the sad thing, I think I might have actually lost your copy, Damir.
Really?
Because I brought it to France. Remember when you weren't with us, but I was at that castle in Normandy.
Oh, yeah.
With Ben Haddad, and I was trying to read it there, but then I think I might have left it in the castle.
Peter, do you have a feeling of self-loathing when you hear stories like this, that our friends are just reading each other's books in castles in Normandy? Isn't this what the problem is? This is why the populists are getting their pitchforks up against us?
Right. I've never been that narcissistic. I mean, this is my problem. I've never seen myself as part of any kind of elite or establishment. I don't feel the pitchforks are directed at me.
But I mean, Shadi's reading your book in a chateau somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, Normandy's full of that stuff. That's like, it's like being a Hungarian count. Everybody in Hungary is a count.
Even Sebastian Gorka probably.
Is he a count? Count Gorka?
No, but I mean, he's Hungarian, right?
That's true. So therefore probably a minor aristocrat. I don't know. Castle Normandy is like, whatever.
Yeah.
That's just how we roll. That's normal.
Yeah.
That's standard.
And we also have Karina Orlova here. So this is, we go from just me and you to 4 people in a room. It's kind of crazy.
It's the most guests we've actually ever had in our history as a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I think, Damir, you kind of missed that. I think Shadi said that he didn't read the book.
Right, he didn't read the book.
He was going to read it, and then he left it there. He kind of lost it there. No. So how do you, Peter, feel about that?
No, I'm sort of in the middle of it. To be honest, I didn't finish it, but I have read enough of it to know it's a great book. Yeah.
No, I mean, it is a great book. Without exaggerating, it's if anyone knows nothing about, I think modern Russia, and they want how to put it, just a good intro that is not didactic or academic, but is entertaining, but really captures, I think, the moment. I always recommend that book to whoever it is. I think it's quite good for that.
And the telltale sign, I think, of all good books on Russia is they really capture, at least what appears to me as an outsider, to be the absurdity of life. And they're just, I'm not even sure what the right words are for it, because it seems really foreign to me as someone who has never been to Russia and who doesn't study Russia. But I think one thing that you capture, at least in the parts of the book that I read, is really this kind of, this absurdity and this foreignness and this Kafkaesque aspect to living in Russia and getting through the day. Is that fair to say?
No. I mean, when one starts living in Russia, one realizes that all these great Russian books that I grew up with as well, because I grew up in London, like, Gogol and Bulgakov and all these fun, crazy surrealist books are not surrealism at all. They're realism. That's just what Russia is like. So maybe not Kafka. I mean, there's a very rich Russian tradition of describing Russia this way.
When's the last time you've been back
to Moscow?
To Moscow, yeah.
Well, I haven't actually. Last time I was there was the day MH17 got shot down.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, I was there. I was doing writing a report on Russian propaganda, and that was quite a few years ago. 2014.
15.
15.
15.
Yeah,
Yeah,
15.
2015. But I go to Ukraine a lot, which is nothing like Russia, but gives me some sort of insights into some goings on.
It was 14. I'm sorry.
It was 2014. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, so how is your stuff received there? I mean, obviously, in Moscow, there's a relatively free and there's a liberal scene, and it's fine. But have you ever given talks to sort of more government types about your work and research, or has it mostly just been to common thinkers in Moscow? Do you ever get invited to talk about your research?
Yeah.
Never?
I don't think anybody knows who I am in Moscow. I occasionally get featured on some of the nasty propaganda programs as one of the enemies of Russia. But I'm in a list. It's always like Anne Applebaum, Edward Lucas,
Peter Pomerantsev.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, the little munchkin. My new books actually has been translated by a Russian publishing house, and it's coming out there, I think, in March. So maybe the new one will be of interest. I don't think... I describe Russia for a foreigner. Why would Russians care?
Well, I mean, the other part of the book, apart from describing Russia, is that that first book really does lead into the second book in a lot of ways. It describes not just modern Russia, but the sort of media landscape that, I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. The argument, to a certain extent, is it was born in 1990s Russia. At least a lot of the stuff that shapes our reality today started then. And to really understand ourselves, I mean, the poignant part at the end of the book is you come back to the West and you see it already bleeding into it. And now here we are several years later, and it's Trump world, it's up is down.
And maybe, Damir, for the benefit of our dear listeners, we should just mention the title of Peter's latest book. It's called This Is Not Propaganda, Adventures in the War Against Reality. So we'd recommend our very rabid fan base to kind of take a look and buy a copy of your book.
How many people listen to your podcast, just as a matter of interest?
I don't know.
It's more than you might think.
Yeah,
actually.
come on, give us your numbers. Give us your numbers.
Okay, I swear, I have actually walked into random house parties in DC, and people will be like, "Oh my God,
You're Shadi.
You're
that same
Shadi
Shadi.
Damir from the podcast.
Yeah, it's like, wait, I've been listening to your podcast with Damir. Like, your podcast is awesome. And I swear, like, these are sometimes people I've never met before, but the thing they get excited about is the podcast.
Okay.
So more than you'd imagine.
But in terms of, like, it's very easy to track numbers of downloads and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think we're about a 1,200 per episode is kind of where we're at, which is pretty solid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Okay, Peter's not impressed.
Of course not.
It's good.
So no pressure. We can be really irreverent here. Only 1,200 people will ever hear it.
No, but there are 1,200 really important people.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
It's people at Shadi's house parties.
Shadi, tell me which house parties you've been going to recently.
Well,
Just so I get a sense of who I'm talking to.
So there are some. It depends. Like I would like to say that I hang out with different kinds of people. I have my friends like Damir.
And don't go to house parties.
No, but it's interesting. So I think that as I've gotten more into questions around the role of religion in America and things like that, I've gotten to know more conservatives who are engaged on these issues. And sometimes they invite me to their parties and they're really into like bizarre these more niche podcasts. And I think those are some of the people who have really gotten into what we do, because we focus a lot on religion, culture, identity in a kind of irreverent way. And we ramble a lot and we don't really have a script. And I think that there's a certain kind of personality that finds that appealing.
Right.
A certain kind of personality.
So it's basically your own kind of identity formation. People like go, how are you listening to the cool podcast? Like, this is the new cool podcast. So is that how kind of matchmaking is done? It's like, oh, I knew she was the one for me because she listened to Shadi's podcast.
You know,
we're just that niche.
I mean, I haven't profited in that way from this podcast.
This
if that's
like
what you're saying.
I think you have a kind of like, podcast Tinder thing going on here.
Podcast Tinder.
Yeah.
So you think, wait, we're matching people, or
Yeah, so
or
it'll
Shadi and I are using it to?
It's like, when you're a teenager, you like go out with somebody who likes the same weird,
Oh, so
East
Shadi and I are
Coast hip-hop
partnering
thing.
up.
Yeah, you like remember
We're
when
discovering each other.
Remember when Jurassic 5 started as a rap group, and like it was kind of cool to know them. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of like the Jurassic 5 of. I mean, it's very early Jurassic 5.
I think what Peter means is that out of those 1,200 people who listen to the podcast,
our wives are among
they
them?
might actually amongst themselves, if they meet someone like, oh my God, you listen to that too.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
They
I see.
actually decide to marry each other because of me and you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, maybe not. Maybe go for a dinner date. I didn't say marry, but like a start of something. But obviously that's what I meant. Sorry, was that not clear?
No, I get it. I get it now.
Shadi, yeah.
But maybe just for the benefit of our listeners, can you maybe, Peter, say a little bit about the surrealism for people who don't know Russia all that well? How would you sort of describe that to the kind of lay outsider? Like about some of those vignettes that maybe, especially you talked about in the first couple chapters of the book, where I think you went into some club with like some really interesting characters and just crazy shit ensued, right?
You remember that one? When crazy shit ensued?
There was definitely something about going to a club with like random like Russian women who were like the girlfriends of oligarchs or something like that.
I don't know. Look, this is all a long time ago. This is Moscow's jazz age, lots of money, early 2000s, amazing parties. I'm glad I saw it and survived. So I don't know. It was quite, I don't think it's particularly unfamiliar from a description of a party in America's jazz age in the 1920s. It's that kind of oil boom, and it's that kind of energy.
I'm sorry. I'm basically scandalized that Shadi, is talking about this absurdity and surrealism as if it doesn't exist here in the States already.
Okay,
I'm sorry, Shadi, but it's so you're like so surprised and you're so curious about it as if it's something so exotic. Which is not, because, here, finally, we have all this surrealism, all this United Russia surrealism, crazy stuff going on.
Well, tell me,
right away.
Well, we can talk about the politics.
In the Capitol, like this crazy Republican senator, he told Manu Raju from CNN, I'm not talking to you. You're a liberal hack. Do you know who calls others liberal hacks? Like Russians. Russians do that.
Okay,
I was called a liberal hack, a liberal fascist, in fact, when I was hosting ECHO's programs in Moscow. That's how crazy it is.
Karina, don't get me wrong. We have our weird things in the U.S. too, but I think the Russian version of it it's not exactly the same.
Oh,
there's something different about it, right?
It's just been longer. Yeah. Wait, watch it.
Well, I don't know what you guys think about this. So my other main exposure to Russian life is from Svetlana, I always mispronounce her last name.
Alexievich, yeah.
Nobel Prize winner from a few years back. She wrote this wonderful book that I read recently called Secondhand Time. And she has these little vignettes with Russians where she does sort of linger on the exceptionalism of Russia in some interesting. So she has this exchange between, I guess, I'll find it. It's really good. But anyway, she really emphasizes Russian suffering, that Russians love this idea from her, like this is what she seems to be conveying in her book, that Russians almost in this weird way take pride in their long history of suffering. And it's that suffering that makes them feel distinctly Russian. So I think there are these aspects that come through in the work of Russian writers, this kind of Russian exceptionalism. Is that not fair?
It is. Yes, it is. I don't support this idea. I mean, I don't share this feeling. So probably I'm not Russian at all.
You're not suffering.
I hate it. I don't think it's it's bullshit. Actually, it's suffering.
Okay.
No, yeah, suffering is meant for like idiots. It's like this fasting in Christianity, in like Orthodox Russian Christianity. It's all. It was created because there was like a hunger and there was no crops, and so people were told you have to fast in the name of Jesus Christ, and we're fasting. But you know what? Guess
But
what?
they were starving.
Yeah, we call it. I'm not sure if
we call
there's.
the Holodomor the Great Fast. I mean, Stalin was just getting Ukrainians to fast.
Yes.
No, not this. I mean, listen, Peter, that's fine. Yeah, but just help me out. There's this great expression in Russian. It's called разговоры в пользу бедных. It's like, talks in, benefit, like,
How would you translate
comforting. Yeah, like,
Разговор о чём?
разговор в пользу бедных. It's like the talk that comforts the poor.
Oh, yeah,
so
okay.
So this suffering stuff, it's the talk that comforts the poor. That's it. I mean, there's nothing good in suffering, in being poor, in being miserable, in being, it's not cool.
Well, so look, I mean,
but unfortunately, 99.9% are that. So
look, I've had this other theory, right? That it's like kind of how the French and the Americans are flip sides of the liberty coin. There's also something about, I think, how weird America is and how weird Russia is, and this is not about Trump or Putin. I think it's just there's a kind of weirdness in the water. You live here long enough. I personally don't see it so much anymore. You're going to be teaching in Baltimore, so you'll be spending a lot of time there. Baltimore, I feel, is like one of the
don't repeat it. Don't repeat it.
No.
I know
the sources of weirdness, just like the sources of weirdness.
Well, if you look at the great Roger Waters, that's it.
Yeah, not Roger Waters. What's his name?
That's someone else.
Roger Waters is from Pink
Floyd.
Floyd.
Yeah, and he is weird.
John Waters.
John Waters
John
movies
Waters
are all
in his
about
films.
that. Yeah,
John Waters,
yeah.
and so there used to be a bar in Baltimore that I think is closed right now, but when I was in college, I was going there a lot, and it's called the Rendezvous Lounge. It was near Johns Hopkins, just a couple of blocks away. Hopkins kids never went there. It was all like a locals bar, and Waters would hang out there. He would just sort of pop in there, and it was like a bar from Star Wars, just like a bunch of weirdos. Now, Baltimore has, as I think you're discovering, it's a lot of problems, and it can be a very depressing place. But it's also, it's reasonably cheap to live. It attracts strange people, and it has like a lot of American cities, a really interesting and weird sort of background, which I think, as Americans, Shadi, we take for granted. And I think, it's easy for us to sort of exoticize Russia. But I mean, so the question for you, Karina, for example, now living here, how weird is America for you?
Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to defend Russia.
No.
I mean, Russia is horrible, and it's in all possible ways. Yeah, really, it's one of the worst places on earth. Trust me.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, that's probably one of the worst places on earth.
Yes.
But why? But why do you think that? That's interesting that you would say that.
Yeah, because, I can't remember. Yeah, I'm only 34, but I know, I read history books, and I know that there has not been, probably like a decent period of 10 years of good life in Russia for Russians, for the people. It's always been a mess. And it's horrible. It's just a horrible place to live. It's always been like that.
But so that's different. That's different from how we view America, because
true.
This is where maybe the surrealism comes in. Americans have their interesting, unique features, but when living life in America as an American, I don't feel that I experience a lot of surrealism. So if that's the word that we're using to
even with
describe,
Trump,
but I
was talking about.
I know you're talking about politics. I'm trying to get us into this more like the broader question, because, for example, where it's weird. West Coast for me is weird. That's where I get a sense of how strange America is.
West Coast is amazing. It's so close to Europe, and this is weird. The East Coast is weird.
Fair enough. But
Florida is weird. Palm Beach is weird. I mean, it's crazy. It's horrible.
Well, okay, so tell me about what you find weird about. Wait, hold on. Tell me about. So tell me, how long have you been in the States now, Karina?
4 years.
4 years, and you've been traveling a bit. You've been getting a sense of it.
I'm not allowed to leave the country, so I have to travel inside the US.
So good. So now, I mean, not good, but tell me about the, your impressions again. So you're saying, now you said West Coast is not weird, the East Coast is weird. Tell me about that.
To me,
to you as an outsider. I think that's right.
The West Coast is, I don't like LA. I prefer Northern California. It's nice, it's very,
The people
it's
are
relaxed.
different.
People are different. The food is so good. It's so European. You won't find in the worst restaurant in California. You won't find you will find better food than you can find here in like different restaurants. And so the approach, it's more relaxed and it's more European. I don't know how, because the West Coast is so much farther from.
Is it European?
For Europe, to me, yes. I mean, it's closer. Maybe it's not fair to call it European, but it's closer.
To me, it's like
to
these people that like to hike a lot, and that's weird.
No.
They're always just like, "Oh, let's go out." No, they do. That is.
That really makes me uncomfortable. These
It's so
outdoorsmen
outdoorsy,
people.
It's weird.
What? No.
I mean, you're maybe hanging out with cool hipsters in San Francisco, but in general, I mean, like,
No, my guys are like, one of them is vice president of a tech company, so they're not hipsters. They're like,
okay, right. Vice
hipsters.
president of a, they're gonna be living the sort of the life.
Fancy life, yeah. Yeah, nice. I mean, it's nice here. So I can see the difference. You can always tell the difference between the West Coast, wealthy people and the East Coast wealthy people, especially this, Florida, Palm Beach. I've seen that. I was shocked.
You live part-time in Florida, yeah?
Yeah, I don't live there. I just go there a lot. And I've been to Palm Beach again. I keep talking about Palm Beach because it horrified me. Have you guys been?
I've never been.
Have you been? Have you been? Don't go.
Peter, have you been how much have you traveled around the States?
I mean, I have a lot of relatives here, so I go and see them a lot.
And where are they? Where are they based?
They used to be in New York, so I spent all my summers in Brighton Beach as a child. So
Oh,
I
wow.
I know a little bit about America, just that bit of it really. And then now they're in New Jersey, and then we have a lot of friends in Oregon.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
we were the only bit of the family that stayed in Europe after emigrating from the USSR, and so kind of most of my parents' friends and family are here.
So you've done the bi-coastal thing, so you can compare East Coast, West Coast, right?
Yeah, I mean.
Oregon is West Coast. It's
Yeah,
very
no, it
nice.
is. It's
I
very
think
much
I wonder,
so.
I wonder what we can nail when we say European. What the West Coast is a wine culture, and that wine feedback and that relationship with time and that sophistication that wine brings. I think that's maybe what we mean by European. That's the lifestyle. If we talk about LA specifically, I mean, LA is the city that's most similar to Moscow that I've ever been to. It's that same mix of money, love, and mysticism.
And superficiality.
Well, it's both, but a kind of a cult of superficiality where it's theatrical. The theatricality of existence is very evident in both. That same kind of weird dynamic, sugar daddy surrounded by pretty girls, which is very Moscow and very LA. I mean, but Moscow also has Washington in it. So imagine Washington was inside LA, and then you have Moscow and snow.
Right.
But when I came to LA, I was like, okay, finally I find a place that resonates with my still very deep love of Moscow.
You still have it. You still share it.
Well, because I haven't been there for 5 years, so I can. It's my youth. So
Okay.
Well, so can I, I just want to quote something from Secondhand Time. It's a really interesting, so, okay, I'll just read this out because I think it conveys this idea that we were talking about. Okay. So I guess she's just quoting some random Russian person. And so the way that Secondhand Time, Svetlana Alexievich's book, it's kind of these anecdotes and vignettes from different Russians that she spoke to over a certain period of time. Okay, here's a Russian speaking. I want to live in a different kingdom where the rivers run with milk and their banks are heaped with jam. We're dreamers, of course. Our souls strain and suffer, but not much gets done. There's no strength left over after all that ardor. Nothing ever gets done. The mysterious Russian soul. ... Everyone wants to understand it. They read...
Finally. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, can I just
Thank
get?
you.
I'm getting to the okay. I'm getting to the punchline, guys.
okay. Sorry.
They read Dostoevsky. What's behind that soul of theirs? Well, behind our soul, there's just more soul.
Oh my God.
So I like that. That's really interesting.
God.
all the way down.
I'm sorry.
So when a Russian asks, like, so what is behind the Russian soul?
Do you
more
think?
soul.
Do you think this quote belongs to a 15-year-old teen that is, who is trying to be very high.
Well, it seems rather
there.
poetic.
No, it seems rather
That is
pathetic.
that is the antithesis of poetry. Poetry is all about finding new ways to describe what you can't express. In Russian, you could do kind of a textual analysis. The way the Russian soul is used in Russian discourse, it's always to paper over things we don't want to talk about.
Okay, but
it's the Russian soul. Oh, my grandfather was a KGB officer. It's the Russian soul.
Okay, but
it's the way it's where we in the West have put the subconscious and tried to excavate it. They just have the Russian soul. It's a way of not talking about things. It's the antithesis of poetry.
Okay, but as an outsider who's not really that well versed in Russian literature, we don't actually talk about the Egyptian soul or the Arab soul. I'm actually not used to that way of describing anything. The American soul, even that...
Because we talk about the unconscious. We start exploring it. And Russia never had a big Freudian moment. Dostoevsky's completely misread here in the West. Dostoevsky's a satirist who's laughing at this. The Brothers Karamazov is a satire on this sort of pretentious bollocks. And it always fascinates me, and the Westerns completely misread him.
Okay.
Sorry. It's like obvious when you read him in Russian. He's teasing this.
But also he shared very, very poor beliefs, and he was a very bad person, very dark-minded. That's
One of the best things about him.
Yes, but Shadi, my advice: once you encounter a Russian person who starts to feed you with this crap about Russian soul, just run away and never go back. It's just, really.
But to be fair, I think that
sincere
I think
advice
that in the book she's also problematizing it. So it's not as if this is meant to be taken at face value, unless you guys have a different reading. I think that she's trying to get into these Russian this Russian self-perception or these Russian stereotypes as Russians themselves see it, and she's trying to understand what is really behind this way of talking.
Yeah,
and
that's why she's so important. And that's why she's ignored in Russia, by the way. She is all about that. She's like, let's excavate the trauma.
Yeah.
Her books are, sod this Russian soul. Let's talk about the soldiers that were brought back in zinc coffins. Let's talk about Chernobyl. What's fascinating about Alexievich is completely ignored in Russia, completely ignored by the Moscow literati. And when she won the Nobel Prize, they were like, this Belarusian woman who just does interviews won the Nobel Prize? We do such high things, exploring the soul. And no, she's the opposite. She's an attempt to do therapy.
Yeah.
As in bringing into speech these terrible experiences. My sound of throwing up was not at Alexievich,
yeah.
I think is incredibly important.
Okay. Yeah.
No.
So tell us about this Moscow literati. Are they just totally vacuous?
No, they're brilliant and excellent. A tragedy happened with Russian culture. In the sense, up until the 19th century, Russian culture is part of European culture and plays a huge role in it. Maybe, credit where credit's due, probably, the biggest one in Europe in terms of its sort of literary and poetic power. And then when the Soviet Union happens, you see it drifting away and becoming encased in its own problems which aren't universal. And essentially you have this generation of geniuses in Russia, because it still churns out geniuses, but they're just kind of trapped in their own little bubble, doing kind of Russian postmodernism that only Russians understand, which is great, but it's completely untranslatable. Actually, Pussy Riot, I thought, were the first Russian cultural phenomenon which made sense in the West. Because they'd been very influenced by the West, and at least here was someone, one could, question how, well, they were very successful. They were using protest art, and they were very successful at that. But they were the first ones where I saw Westerners go, oh, well, we understand what they're doing. A lot of time, Westerners look at kind of contemporary Russian poetry or novels, and they just don't understand what's going on, because it's so self-referential, and it's so caught in these little micro games.
As you're talking there, something struck me, because, the great Russian soul thing ends up getting picked up by all Slavs that are trying to sort of come up with a nation under all these empires, right? It ends up being this the Slavic, the tortured Slav thing. But that is something that happens in the mid to late 19th century. And there's something to the fact that the impact of Russia as the Russian Empire, it's I guess somehow that, I don't know, maybe unpack that for me. How does that sort of come up?
Let's play around on this, because the literary tradition where there really is a genuine tradition of suffering and it makes sense from its national story is Ukraine. So the Ukrainian poetry is always about the suffering poet who is literally arrested by the Russian Tsars, Shevchenko, or the KGB, Stus, and sent to the Gulag and dies for his language. So Ukraine is deeply linked with its history of fighting for its language and dying for its language and being sacrificed for it. So that's kind of, it's almost as if Russia is the imperial power, is as a culture nicking the suffering that it's imposed on its colonials and bringing it into itself. There could be a weird type of imperial appropriation going there. Because Russia, of course, is the opposite. It's the aggressor.
Right.
So I don't know. In Ukraine, it's been very interesting to see how Ukraine has evolved very recently from this tradition of the suffering Ukrainian poet, which is about real suffering and real sacrifice and real danger, into something else. You now have finally a generation of Ukrainian writers who do not play the suffering card. They're joyful writers. They celebrate freedom, a post-colonial experience. So that's very interesting. And there, I think, the suffering is very, but the old suffering was very legitimized. So was it Russia, pushing forward its suffering, or quite the opposite? Was it Russia kind of like gathering the suffering of others for its to blot out its own guilt?
No, I mean, so again, just to push on, because I think it really is an interesting point you're getting at. When does this Russian soul stuff start making an appearance? Obviously, Dostoevsky is poking fun at it already, so it's already playing a role in the sort of literature in the 19th century. But they're still an empire at that point. So when does it become when do they imbibe the colonial narrative? When they're colonized by the Georgian, by Stalin and that Stalinism takes it? No, it's before then that this sort of stuff is kicking around, right?
I mean, so Russia, okay, I'm not a Russian literary historian. I'm sure there's people who studied the genesis of the origins of the Russian soul kind of narrative. No. But I think Karina was on something very, very prescient there. I mean, Russia isn't just a country that colonizes others, it colonizes itself. So, I don't know, maybe it's in that dynamic, in the oppression of others, oppression of your own population, and then using suffering as a cult to kind of like excuse the suffering that you impose.
But a lot of countries oppress their own citizens. What would you say is distinctive about what makes it a step above that, which is this kind of self-colonization? How would you
I mean, the numbers of murdered people in gulags. It's kind of, Russia is the champion of suicide. And the
consistency.
It kind of takes it to a different level.
Yeah.
It's like there's a lot of suicidal cultures out there. Russia is just like,
Has there ever been a Russian leader who would, promote joy and, happiness or something like that? I mean, who is this person?
At least the Germans killed other people. Jeez.
Yeah,
I've heard that argument from Russian.
Well,
have you really?
Yeah, it's quite common.
Is part of it also that Russian leaders or Russian elites see ordinary Russians as other, that there is a kind of internal foreignness?
So look, actually, the system that I think it's most similar to, I know, is the English one, because obviously the English class system is based on the Norman invasion, and the class system is a legacy of internal colonization. In Russia, yes. I mean, the way it's always explained is the Tatar Mongols came and conquered us. The Russian elites actually worked with them. Alexander Nevsky, sort of the great Russian hero that's always top in the league of great Russian heroes, actually worked with the Mongols, and his great efficiency was murdering his own people in their service. So when the Russians become the new Mongols, they then oppress themselves. And it's like, as a former, we see this problem over and over, sort of colonial cultures, when they get into power, take on the attributes of the imperial master. And so Russia kind of internalized the Mongol yoke and yoked its own people. Anyway, that's what people tell me when I drink with Russians. That's how they explain it. I'm like, where does it start? They're like, it's the Tatar Mongols. Fuck them.
Yeah, but at least recently, maybe the last couple centuries, Russians have been rather resistant when it comes to outside powers trying to assert control over them. There is this idea of Russian sovereignty and Russians controlling Russia, where in large swaths of the Middle East, you don't have that, for example. But Russians have held on to this sense of, we are at least going to be in control of our own destiny. Or is that just a misreading? Because at least that's been the case for a while, that Russians have been very protective and saying, we are Russians, we kill each other, but at least we're not going to have another country or another imperial power or the US or whatever telling us what to do.
It's the gift of geography in a way, right?
Russia conceives of itself as a great power and empire, And obviously they think that way. Yeah. Yeah. We have the right to create our own gulags.
But they,
No, yeah, exactly.
But
yeah.
they're also able to.
That's a sign of our power, yeah.
But it's also
the
you're
fact that
able
we can kill our own people and arrest them and rid them of rights is a sign of power.
But again, the difference is that in the Middle East and in Europe also, the geography plays a role. I mean, that's always been the fact that Russia's so massive, you can just always retreat and fight another day. Whereas Poland didn't have that option. You're not retreating anywhere. Ukraine also doesn't have that option, even though much less than Poland. I mean,
well, I mean, if you talk about Poland and Russia, Russia has always managed to, I think it's partitioned Poland 3 times now over the course of Poland's history, always in the name of self-defense.
Right. Yeah.
I know, because they're so worried about the foreign Lithuanians coming and dominating them. We hear a lot about it. The Lithuanians are coming because the Lithuanians came for like 5 days in the 16th century. The Lithuanians are coming, therefore we have got to take Crimea.
Right.
I'm glad we've internalized that logic because it's important.
No, but all I'm saying is, compared to the Middle East, is that it's just a tighter geographical spread, right? And you have
Russia's very tight. It's very tiny, and it's surrounded by enemies.
Right? No. But the fact that it's not, it can have this paranoia about constantly being invaded, but as a matter of fact, it can also do this like weird sovereigntist things, like we don't let anyone do it because they can get away with it. Poland can have we're sovereign sort of ideology, but they're going to get invaded because they have Germans next door and Russians, right?
But to take like Egyptians as a contrast, another sort of self-perceived great nation, Egyptians still to this very day see themselves as the center of the universe, as one of the world's greatest civilizations. I know it's probably sounds absurd.
Well, at least they were at some point.
No, they still think they are. But
that's the problem. But at least they were, unlike Russians.
I mean, when was it? Well, Egypt was a great civilization like 3,000 years ago, so it's been a long time.
That happened. Like with the Italians, they also suffer from that.
Yeah, but Russians have at some point been a great civilization, like, right?
I'm sorry. No. Russians were like decent when they, started, accommodating all the good from the West, of course, because all good comes from the West. It was like the 18th century and a little bit of that. But before that, it was a mess. It was like the Ivan the Terrible. And, so when Shakespeare was writing his plays, Russians were hanging dogs and people.
Well, to be fair, so with the English, that was like they're doing. Like hanging dogs was like kind of a thing.
But there's a lot to be proud of when it comes to music, literature in the last 150 years. And aren't there also, I'm just bullshitting. I don't know what I'm talking about.
But they're not that great.
No, but there are.
They met some European standards. That's it.
But Egyptians don't have that. Like when you look back at the last 150 years.
You have Mo Salah, okay? Mo Salah just kills everything.
That's a soccer player for our American listeners.
A soccer player? Yeah. A soccer player? Okay.
One of the greatest soccer players of the modern era. Yeah. But I guess so Egyptians will be even, maybe I shouldn't use the word, I shouldn't use the royal we when I'm talking about Egyptians because I don't really consider, that's a whole story on its own.
Yeah.
But I am my parents came from Egypt, so I'm Egyptian American, I guess. And, Egyptians still talk about Egypt. They use this Arabic phrase, Dunya, which means mother of the world. And that's still a phrase that is often used to this very day, that despite the fact that we have really no great victories or successes that we can claim, at least in the last several hundred years, there still is this sense of Egyptian greatness. And that actually creates a certain sense of dissonance in the self-perception because Egyptians are confused. They've encountered a precipitous decline, yet they still hearken back to this great illustrious history. That can really fuck you up to have that dissonance.
Sorry.
Say.
No.
Go. Come on.
No.
Come on. Overpolite
No,
Russians.
I was just a quick remark. That's what distinguishes Russians from Egyptians. Egyptians, at least one, they were like the mother of the world at once, right? At some point. And second, they now have this, existential crisis in their mind. So they know they are in decline, but they also know that they were great. Russians don't have any hesitation of that. They think they are great and they have always been. But what this is based on, I have no idea.
But there is a Russian sense of decline, like something went wrong. I mean, isn't that?
No,
I mean,
everything went great, actually.
No, but But I mean, the 1990s, where you have the collapse of the structures that people had grown up with and were used to, and the 90s were a time of trauma and of chaos and of not understanding what it meant to be Russian in this new phase. And there was almost this sense of being overturned, that everything we knew to be true as Russians was no longer true. So that's where some of the surrealism comes into it, right? That the 90s were a sense of collective trauma of, we don't want to go back to the way things were in the 90s, where we lost our sense of certainty, when we lost our sense of self, where this kind of hyper-capitalism, hyper-consumerism took over everything. And there is that narrative of the 90s being this very dark time. Is that not fair to say? Okay.
So I only came to Russia in the early 2000s, but I did visit it a lot in the 90s. And I already started working there. And Karina can tell you much more. And certainly, I was working on documentaries during the 90s as a translator, covering this period. And everything you said was true about this incredible turmoil, this lack of a language, sense of self, social roles. One thing never went away. We are an empire and we are great. That did not disappear for a second. Not for a second.
You see, we say the same. It means that's
in the early 90s, that's who we are. We're an empire and we're great. We don't know if we're communist, capitalists, if it's prestigious to be a millionaire or an engineer, all that, yes. But we're great, I mean, obviously.
But how do people who think they're great reconcile that greatness with the sense of turmoil, in the sense that something had gone wrong, that people could feel kind of instinctively that...
How do they reconcile it? Alexievich, they talk about the Russian soul. They can't reconcile it, so they go, oh, it's the Russian soul, which is the way of not dealing with all these glaring contradictions.
Well, and then they point to this idea that there's these times of troubles that come up, and then there's all this mythology of empire as well.
To what extent this is all,
Yeah, it's all mythology.
Well, it's not mythology. It's a replacement for really trying to understand what's going on.
Well, so, so there's a tweet by... I don't know if you guys know who Thomas Chatterton Williams is.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he's a cultural critic, is African-American, I think born in Jersey, moved to Paris.
Has a great new book out, actually, called Self-Portrait in Black and White.
Yeah.
Unlearning Race.
We ran a review of it in the magazine. So he tweets, I thought it was really funny, I just wanted to bring it up here, said, I often think of something my blonde-haired, blue-eyed Russian sister-in-law told me. It reveals how race is not about biology. When there's an especially well-laid table, she said, it is not uncommon in Russia for someone to remark, tonight we will eat like white people.
Yeah. Actually, they say that. That's absolutely
I've heard it so many times, but only when you said it in English did I realize how racist it is. It's like, как белые люди is like all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yes,
Well, I mean,
yes.
so I've only been to Russia. I was there in 2003, and the weird way how that, as you said, like these things that are totally commonplaces in Russian, they really strike you when you first arrive. And you're learning Russian. I was learning Russian at the time. And yeah, the thing about white and black and how this all plays out. I don't know. So,
no white and black. So I can speak
bit.
for racism because my father is Armenian, and Armenians, and as well as Georgians and Azeris, there's former Soviet Union countries, and like Caucasus, right? Yeah. So they're perceived as blacks. So they're the blacks of Russia. So my father would always be called so they don't call them an N-word, but the similar to N-word is like the chernozhopes, like black-assed, So even though I am, light hair, I have light hair, light eyes, so I don't really look like Armenian because they're like dark. They look like more like Shadi. Yeah, really.
Okay.
Like my father does.
Shadi the black ass.
Yes. Yeah, so my father looks like Shadi a bit.
Wow. I did not know that about your father.
Yeah, that's a very important piece of information. And he would be harassed all the time in the 90s, and I would be harassed. And so that's how I have a perfectly normal Russian last name. This is my mother's last name, of course, not my father's. And she chose to give me her last name because she knew in 1985, how hard it is to be raised and, in Russia to bearing this Armenian last name. And so she was right, actually.
But, again, there is this again, I think it gets at something, maybe, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, about, again, sort of this weird Russian identity and this kind of insecurity about it. There are no black people in Russia.
Well, there are a few, and when Russians see
But doesn't this go back to feudalism? Where does this tyranny come from? This blackness, doesn't it come from some sort of feudal thing?
Let's rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
Russia's an empire. It's deeply multicultural, very multi-ethnic, and very multiracial.
Sure.
There might not be black Africans, but as Karina says, they would just refer to people from the Caucasus, and it's got Central Asian, and then there's Tatars living in the middle of it.
There's a large Muslim minority.
So it's very, very multicolored when you go there, and obviously a lot of Kalmyks, a lot of Asians. So this is not a white country. And actually, if we go into that, so in America, Italians were referred to as black when they first arrived.
No,
so
that's
these
right.
are very moving things.
Yeah. Is it moving in Russia as well, the target of this, or is it more set in language and culture somehow, that it's just like there's something about the ethnic Russian and then the other?
There's a complete schizophrenia between Russian nationalism, which has a white thing going, and the reality of kind of like it's an empire and wants to be an empire, and they're constantly going back and forth. It's one of these many irreconcilable contradictions. We want to be an empire. We don't want all these Tajiks in our city. It's just like, choose, But yeah, I mean, this is one of the many, you can't understand, is it a nation or an empire? Again, there are the closest parallel in that sense, in terms of historical confusions, is Britain. Britain, for all its, illnesses, is probably a healthy way of dealing with losing an empire, but Russia has never thought of itself as a nation. It's always been an empire. Now it has to make sense of it as a nation, but it's kind of a federal nation. It's very confusing. So while I completely agree that the messianic nature and the theatricality is very similar to America, and America and Russia, for me, do feel quite similar at times. In terms of historical baggage, Britain and Russia are very nice parallels. Also, two empires on the edge of Europe who define themselves by constantly asking, am I European?
Right. Okay, but maybe one difference, and here I'm in a kind
There's a few differences. I'm just saying the similarity.
But one difference that stands out for me, as an American and as someone who's not a Russian, and I'll indulge perhaps in some stereotypes here, and I hope that you'll forgive me for that. But I think that there is this idea that Americans are very forward-looking. That, when Americans look at the Middle East, they're like, get over that shit that happened 100 years ago.
Sorry, this is America where the president says, make America great again. This America?
No, I think all America, right?
No,
because
you're right.
I share the same views.
Trump is perhaps in some ways more past-centric than I think.
He's more Russian. He's Russian. We've been saying this for so long.
That's interesting. That's actually, that's a very interesting point, actually. But I would say that Americans writ large there's a kind of built-in optimism of looking to the future, that the past is the past and it's time to move on. It's time to get over that shit. But even to be fair, Trump and Trump supporters do have this approach when it comes to race that, hey, bad things happened back then, but Black people are experiencing the best unemployment rates of several generations, and Trump. So I think even with Trump or Trumpists, there is this sense of get over it. The future is here. The future is not history. And I think that, and this is a reference, to Masha Gessen's book, which is called "The Future is History," and I think that she's getting at something important there, that Russia or Russians are not traditionally very future-centric. That would be the stereotype, at least.
Absolutely true. Russians don't have the future because, it always changes and it can change at any given moment.
The future? Or do you mean the past?
The reality.
Okay.
So Russians don't plan ahead. So that's why we don't have retirement plans. We have state pension. But no, really, that's true because you cannot plan like 5 years ahead. It would be insane. It would be crazy because
I've heard that
if
said,
you
right?
if you ask a Muscovite like, what are you gonna do in 5 years, and it's gonna be okay. In 2024, there's like a big question to be decided. Where does Putin go? Does he go to this chair or that chair or whatever? And no one knows. And I think everyone, like every second Russian, is anticipating something happens, like in 2 years, tomorrow, today. So it's always been like that. So that's why Russians, they're not big planners.
Okay, but how much of that is a cognitive thing that at some basic level, cognitively, in terms of how Russians think about the world around them, that they're not able at some basic level to think into the future? This is not to make like a...
What do you think they're...
No, this is not to make like a biological point. It's just to say that we are...
I think that was just a biological point.
No, but we're products of our circumstances. So even when you look at, Egyptians, I think there's something similar can be said. If you've grown up only under authoritarianism, my parents did not grow up under anything but authoritarianism. And I've always been a big believer that nothing distorts the human spirit more than authoritarianism, that it warps the way you understand time and the way that you understand the world around you. That doesn't mean that there's anything inherent about it, because if Egyptians had grown up with the same biological content, but they were growing up in a democracy, they would be different. But they grew up under an authoritarian regime. But God, thank God my parents were able to leave Egypt and have some of their formative years in the US, my mom in her 20s and my dad in his 30s, and that changed the way they saw the world. But their DNA was the same, but you put them in a different set of circumstances, a different environment, and they become different people, and even the way they understand time becomes different.
So you've been referencing Alexievich's book, which is called Secondhand Time, and we could think about that idea of Russia and time. So let's take it. I don't know about things like DNA. I'm not a biologist, but I do think about language a lot. So what's very interesting in Russian, that there is no concept of the pluperfect. The pluperfect is I had done something. That's a past that it's already definitely in the past. So quite the opposite. There is a future tense in Russia. There isn't a sense of a past that you've left behind, which is also a sense of historical progress. So that's very interesting. And the fact that Russian grammatically doesn't have a pluperfect. And therefore, there's this sense that maybe the past can never be left behind. The most popular and most repeated, I'm not saying that now sort of statistically, my sense, it's often repeated, phrase that's used in Russian political kind of slang these days is from a former prime minister, Viktor Chernomyrdin. Хотелось как лучше, но получилось как всегда. We wanted to make things better, but it ended up the same shit as always. There is definitely a fatalism in Russian culture, which Karina's talking about, and a lack of really, as you say, historically determined, not really worth planning for the future, when you might end up in the gulag tomorrow, or the power might change, and one day you're Beria and running the Soviet Union, the next day you're shot. Having said that, there is a utopian thing that's deeply ingrained, and a kind of messianic thing. And, at the end of the day, the way communist ideology was expressed in Russia was incredibly forward-looking. So there is some capacity. Maybe it's not the Western idea of rational time. Yeah. It's some sort of that kind of the glorious drunk future when you can't have a sense of progress.
The bright communist future that we're building. Yes, exactly. I wanted to mention it, but no one believed in that shit. I mean, maybe for 1 year, someone did believe in it, but it was really utopian. And I mean, so everybody knew in the Soviet Union, I guess, most of, the majority of the people, they knew it was some pretext, some cover up for, whatever shit the party was doing. That's, one, right?
So it's funny, right, that the current sort of turn of events with what's happening in Russia, and we've been going at it for hours, so we should probably wind up pretty soon. But it's interesting that...
Don't make me sad, Damir.
Why?
Yeah, it's time. We need some meat.
Yeah.
Wait, do you mean literally?
Literally.
Or metaphorically?
Both, really. Well, you think it's been thin gruel, Peter? This hasn't been satisfying?
But you know what I wanted to do before this ended?
Go
I
on.
wanted to quote something from Masha Gessen.
Oh
no.
Really?
Oh no.
Wait, okay,
go ahead,
wow,
go
that
ahead.
was not, okay. Look, I know whatever people think, she has her perspective, of course, but she can be a wonderful stylist as a writer. And I think that, it can just be enjoyable to read her sometimes. But you guys you're not into it, whatever.
Go on.
No, quite the opposite.
No.
I think she's been an
eager to hear.
incredible articulator of the Russian condition to
Okay,
Americans.
so I just wanted, because we were talking about the 90s and what
Is
that
she
says.
better than her brother, though? Is it Masha or Keith? If you have to choose.
Of course, Masha's better. I mean,
really?
I'm not a big fan of. I haven't read a
Keith
lot
Gessen?
of Keith's stuff. I guess he wrote a novel recently
she
or
had a
whatever.
very successful novel just out.
Yeah, I didn't read it.
You don't have to choose.
Okay.
But like if you had to,
Okay, so she has this really interesting article in the New York Review of Books that came out in 2014. You might recall it. It's called The Dying Russians. And I absolutely love it. And I'll just maybe quote something. Russians started dying in the 1990s in this kind of like random way, not from natural causes. But what Masha Gessen's trying to convey in this essay is that something very dark started happening, and she started seeing it with her friends and acquaintances. And she starts off the essay.
Bad cocaine? I'm sorry.
No, she starts off the essay with this sentence. Back in the United States after a trip to Russia, this is Masha Gessen talking now. Back in the United States after a trip to Russia, I cried on a friend's shoulder. I was finding all this death not simply painful, but impossible to process. It's not like there is a war on, I said. So Masha is saying this to a friend. But then her friend responds, but there is a war going on. And her friend is a somewhat older and much wiser reporter than Masha, as Masha sees it. And then her friend says this is what civil war actually looks like. It's not when everybody starts running around with guns. It's when everybody starts dying. So some of her friends are dying from alcohol poisoning. Some of her friends or acquaintances committed suicide and jumped off a building. Some of them just died early from a heart attack out of nowhere without any kind of warning. So it's just that there's something, and it's comparable, I think, to what American analysts are talking about now, this idea of deaths of despair, that life expectancy has gone down for the first time in decades, if not longer, because especially white males are dying, and something is wrong, and they're not dying from natural causes. It's about depression, it's about alcohol, it's about drugs. It's about not wanting to live.
Yeah. So I mean, go back to so we're talking it is sort of mass suicide. Even some people do it through suicide, some doing it through drink. It is a self-destructive thing, and there's lots of sociology on it, and I think it is a very similar process, and I try to kind of address it tangentially in my book. Suicide peaks happen when there's some sort of rupture in the culture, when people lose their sense of orientation, those difficult periods that everybody has in their lives. If you have a strong culture around you and stability that can carry you through. And so Durkheim, noticed this many decades, a long time ago. And there's analysis, for example, the spike of suicides in Sweden. Remember Sweden had very high suicide rates? And everyone was like, it's because of the weather. It's like Norway has the same weather and not the same problem. And it was a massive shift in Swedish culture between a kind of a Christian culture and a neoliberal culture, shall we say. And yes, that is very true, that there was a massive rupture in the cultural framework through which people get through the difficult bits of their lives in Russia and in bits of America. But if you read Oliver Bulow's book, which actually tries to get into the figures of this and the numbers of this and taking it much, much deeper, it starts in the 1970s. That's when it starts. That's when the very early death rate starts. That's when the alcoholism peaks. So it's that loss of we can think about why it happens then, but it's actually something it wasn't just the 1990s. It started to happen much earlier.
Right. So I mean, that's all. What I was sort of getting at is what's interesting about the current moment is that you were saying in communism no one really believed any of it in any case, but it's just now you have this shift in government with Putin, and no one cares. Like literally, no one. I mean, unless I'm wrong.
No,
about it, but
absolutely, no one cares.
It's
Hold on, there's a
completely-
whole please. There is a whole employment structure in the city based on people caring.
No,
So
here,
please
of
don't
course.
destroy things.
Yeah. No, but it's true,
People's
right?
pension funds.
It's that the charade is everyone's in on the joke at this point, really. I mean,
Yeah.
and no one's even pretending, right?
My sense is, do people? I mean, Karina, question for you: do people in the sort of Russia watching community care much more than Russians who are like, yeah, whatever?
What?
Do Russians care about this kind of these changes in the Russian government?
With
or are they-
Medvedev? Oh no, they
No,
just
it's just like whatever.
No,
Like,
no one. I
hey.
mean, no one really cares because no one knows that they can't affect anything.
Wait, guys, can I just a point of information? Who is this person that you mentioned?
So the
Medvedev?
Russian Prime Minister
Wait.
Dmitry Medvedev resigned yesterday
Wait,
out of the blue.
Wait, there's a Russian Prime Minister?
Yes.
There's another one actually. In fact.
Okay, I'm
A
just
new
messing
one.
around. Okay, I'm messing around. But it is no. I'm trying to make a point here that like he doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who the Russian Prime Minister is as long
for
as
sure.
Putin's in power,
No, for
right?
sure. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. But what I'm saying is, it's just like if this started in the 70s, as Peter was saying, that we're at a level.
Damir, are you saying we should anticipate a new wave of people suddenly dying?
No,
But
no. I'm saying the
although-
opposite. I'm saying the opposite. It's just been so internalized right now that it's
The mass suicides at Rosneft. Sorry.
No
but
bonuses.
but
Bad
apart from
cocaine.
that,
Actually, the issue of bad cocaine is real big now in
Oh.
Russia. Yeah, because several people died. Like, this famous guy, Pasha Face Control, who is the guy who would,
He was the guy who was face controlling the clubs
Yes,
that I
the
described in my
best
book.
club.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he was 37 and he died. And there was another one, like Pasha Cveta Muzika, DJ, whatever. And one of my friends has now real big problems with heart and he took a lot of cocaine. So I
So
suspect...
why is it bad? What's wrong with it?
No, I think it's just some like really bad cocaine, like chemically bad, like not mixed with like I don't know.
Was it
something.
from Venezuela? Was it smuggled through Venezuela? Is this part of
Unfortunately,
Section's
probably
big
not
deals?
anymore. Maybe it's some like Moscow suburbs cocaine or something. Yeah, but I was. Also, Shadi, I've never heard of this. What Masha says about the 90s, that, people started dying suddenly. Really, that strikes me as some kind of bullshit. I'm
No,
sorry.
but we know that mortality. Like there was a more.
Statistically, there was a very big spike in suicides and a very hard drop-off rate of
Okay,
the
suicides, that's one.
No, but people just,
to
like-
say that people just start dying, like, like flies start, dying of what? What is that? I mean, none of anyone that I know died in the 90s.
But you also were like kind of young in the 90s.
Yeah,
like,
none of my, none of my mom's friends. I mean, a husband of one of, the woman, she lived near us. Yeah, he was shot. Yeah, because he was
Okay,
he
well,
was mafia.
okay,
yeah,
well.
that counts. Yeah, that for sure.
I
But
mean,
that's easily explained. But
My mom doesn't have a lot of friends who were shot.
Yeah, speak for yourself, Shadi. Anyway, guys.
Wait, whoa.
What? Yeah, it's time, Shadi. We've been at this for a while. We're like, any parting
Karina's
thoughts on
having
this?
so much fun. Look at Karina right now.
no, all I can say, like, final point, if Russians could die of despair, I can tell you, Russian population would shrink to 6 million of people. All of them are officials and this chinovniki, like whatever.
So I'll give you one last thing.
Others would die.
Something to cheer you
of
up. The
despair.
clown Slava Polunin, who's this wonderful theatre clown, he does a sort of very amazing routines. Once told a friend of mine how he has to change his clown routines in different countries. So when he does a clown routine and he does these incredible things about sort of a sad person committing suicide. They're very tragic and full of the Russian soul. And so when he does them in England, they have to have a story. There's got to be a story attached to it, yeah? When he does them in France, there has to be some kind of intellectual level to it in some way, which is quite hard to do with physical theatre. In America, it's got to have a happy ending. And in Russia, it's got to have a tragic ending. That's just what you bloody well want. And there was a very funny thing that I was taught in film school, because I went to film school in Russia. I don't know if it's true, but there was this like early period in the very early talkies, when talkies first appeared and whenever they appeared, 20s, 30s.
Wait, what are
Talking movies. Yeah?
Oh, okay,
Because before you
okay.
just had silent movies and you could do one movie for all markets, suddenly you had to do talking movies. And I don't know if this is an anecdote that people say in Russian film school or it's true, but again, it's quite indicative, even it's just an anecdote. So the way talking movies were done at the start is you'd have German actors, Russian actors, French actors, English language actors So the German actors would film a scene, then the Russian actors would do their version of the scene, and the English actors. And that way, the film studios, which the biggest ones were in sort of Berlin and Paris at that time, would be able to create like 4 or 5 language versions of the same film. They found they had to change the last scene in the Russian version once to give it a tragic ending.
Oh.
So there is a desire for tragic endings, and that's part of kind of the pathos.
You know what's really interesting? We have something similar in the Arab world. There's actually a term for it when someone will say, "Oh, that's هذا فيلم عربي," which means, "Oh, that's an Arabic film," and they say that to suggest that there has to be like a kind of melodramatic end to a movie, because that's what Egyptians expect, that there has to be something that really speaks to, oh my God, someone fell in love or fell out of love or died of sadness. And, you know, it's this kind of idea of this hyperbolic emotional state.
I'm really enjoying these comparisons between Egypt and Russia, because in Russian culture, this was us in America. I mean, they even don't want to compare themselves to Britain, because Britain gave up on being an empire. And they're like, oh, God, it's a little bit, you know, don't want to hang out with them.
Passe.
And I like these comparisons with Russia and Egypt. And I think that's a healthy strain of analysis, which I fear a lot of Russians would still reject. Which is
because I don't think Russians probably want to be compared too much to Egypt, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you one last anecdote. So I was in a car with a taxi driver in Russia when I still lived there. And the guy was saying that he's about to leave Russia and go to America. And I was with a Canadian friend. And the Canadian friend was like, look, listen, why don't you go to Canada instead of America? Look, you know, we have better healthcare. And the guy's, really? And, you know, he tells them about American healthcare and Canadian healthcare. We have better education system. And the taxi driver's agreeing and all this stuff, like Canada's much better and you get better property and all this stuff. And at the end, I'm like, it's the taxi driver. So do you think you'll move from Russia to Canada? And he sort of looks at us in the window and says, I can only live in a great country. I have to go to America. And what he meant by great was velikaya, as in a great power.
Great power.
I can only live in a great power. So it has to be America, even though Canada's better. And that is the whole Russian thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good way.
Amazing.
That's really good.
Amazing.
Hold on, that's a journalistic anecdote about a taxi driver. We're not allowed to use those.
No, yeah, of course. Tom Friedman made a multi-billion-dollar career on just that.
I love that, man.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.